Hello, I'm so happy to be joining you today about a topic that I'm very passionate about. Before we get started, all opinions are my own. I have been working a lot with GenAI, and as part of that, I have been working with specifically Microsoft's AutoGen framework, which is a really, really neat way to connect chatbots together and network them to build applications out of large language models. So first off, I want to start with some definitions. An AI assistant is how most people use something like ChatGPT. You provide a prompt, it provides a response, it can search the web, it can generate images, it can do all these fun things. Next is AI agents, which are performing independent tasks. Okay, so you're feeding them some kind of prompt automatically that it completes. Maybe you're providing it a prompt and it has an action it can perform on your behalf. That would be like, for instance, AutoGPT, which is something that allows you to use GPT, or the way I've been using Microsoft AutoGen to execute code automatically with different agents. And finally, there's having an AI manager, and that takes it to another level. That's replacing the human entirely with an artificial intelligence. That's something I've been playing with also. So at the bottom here, I show a couple different models. This is straight from the AutoGen GitHub front page. Also, they have a very active Discord, which I do recommend. A lot of people doing lots of fun stuff on there. You know, the ability to customize these agents and provide them different functions is incredible. And it's all in Python. So any little function you can write on Python, you can provide to these agents, and they're able to call these functions and get back results and pass in you know, the details and get back results. And for instance, they use this to have a chat manager who looks at the conversation and then returns a value for who should be the next speaker. And I just found that really fun to play with, right, and build dynamic conversations. So the capabilities at this point with these large language models, where are we really? You know, it's like a flash of reasoning, which isn't totally fair because it does iterate, right? That's the whole point of these things, but it's one prompt, it's one set of context, the input context, and then it produces the output tokens. And it's input tokens, output tokens, everything's measured in tokens. And tokens are chunks of text, sometimes it's a word, that are associated to some meaning within the network, right? Depending on how the transformations were done and how the training was done for the given LLM, right? Those will be chunked up in different ways. It's part of the magic of LLMs, large language models. So some of the points I wanted to hit, those tokens, 4,000, 16,000. So ChatGPT 3.5, which is what I've been playing with a lot. 4,000 is kind of the default. They've got a turbo, which has 16,000. Claude has something like 100,000. And that's kind of really huge. There are models where they're trying to push that to like millions that are out there, and that's really, really neat research. Another thing that we're learning about at this point, and every week there's new stuff coming out, is that we can basically have like a set of words at the beginning of the system prompt for the entire conversation and keep that consistent. And that can help it keep focused on a task throughout multiple generations. So that's kind of neat. Each generation is where you're actually asking, you're providing the input tokens and getting the output tokens, right? You're generating a response. Then you've got this concept of RAG, which is really popular, which is basically retrieval, meaning, right, like retrieval, sorry, I'm just making sure I'm focused here. Retrieval from some kind of data store, right? And it's getting easier and easier. It's crazy with this stuff, like with Chroma DB. In my Python code, I can specify a directory of PDFs, and those become available for an agent to use for doing its generation. So it can use retrieval to augment the generation, or RAG, right? The challenge has been historically that you can use a vector store which provides soft vectors, meaning that it's not a strong association. It means that it's like more like a statistical association between two tokens or words, rather than, or words mostly in this case, right, for RAG, or strings, rather than a hard vector, which would be more like a traditional entity association. So an entity in this case being, say, a location. A hard vector would say London has these objects inside of it. A soft vector would say London is heavily associated with the words pub and curry. So that's really fascinating. The personalities you assign to these agents, I've found, and I'm getting through just kind of where things are. I'm about to get to a little bit of the practice and then the ethics. So bear with me, right? The personalities you assign to these things have a huge impact. And what I saw was, if I didn't give a personality, I would get no result a lot of the time from queries that were perfectly reasonable to the network, because they didn't have an opinion on a solution. But once I gave even the tiniest shred of personality, when I told you like shrimp, I got results, right? So that was fascinating, and it's something that I'm finding to be fairly universal as I chat with other people who are doing this. That adding a tiny bit of personality to the agent gives them a raison d'etre, or a reason to act or exist. These self-congratulatory loops, I love that term. It's a term I came up with. I don't know, I know other people are facing it, because again, I've seen some chatter. But one of the tendencies of these networks when you set them up is that as soon as they don't have a task, they are very complimentary by default. They're social. I'm anthropomorphizing, right? The statistical network likes to generate positive responses, affirmations, which I love. I love that the network naturally produces affirmations as kind of the default, and that's wonderful. But it means that if you don't watch the network, it will by default kind of loop back into just congratulating itself time after time after time for whatever the last output was. It's really kind of fascinating to watch, because as the context moves out of what they were talking about, it's just literally them congratulating each other on congratulating each other, pretty much. It's great. It's hilarious. Finally, the last thing I wanted to hit on, and it's this graphic at the top. There is, and a credit to Andy Nader, a guy from Discord. He got his GitHub there. There is so much work being done, and this is open source work that I'm looking at here, right? On adding better and better context on what the chat has been, right? So that it fits better within the token limit, and then having dedicated agents for short-term memory and long-term memory. And I love that idea. Or just like, the Python code to augment and tell the agent via prompt, hey, by the way, you've got memory, that's a really neat idea. So little example I wanted to show of something I've been working on just for my own edification. Was this little, focus group code. So you can see the Python up here. I'm defining it. This is how simple it is, right? The execution should not be there for this use case, but I left it there. But what you're seeing is I'm establishing these bots and then putting them in a network to talk to one another. And you can see the response there. And I told this one to be persnickety because I wanted critical feedback. Again, to overcome the self-congratulatory circle, right? The affirmations, it's quite difficult. I was talking to a friend who was trying to do some sophistry or some philosophy with the chatbots that are available today, and found exactly the same thing, that they kind of are self-affirming. So it's interesting via the much maligned term prompt engineering, overcoming those kind of biases. So before I get into the next section, I did want to present some premises and definitions, right? First off, artificial intelligence will continue improving at a rapid pace. That's just a premise I'm putting out there. It might not be true, but it's what I'm building a premise on for the next few slides, which are about ethics. The next premise, there is a ceiling on the desirable level of productivity for humanity or per capita. I see a lot of arguments around AI that continue, I think, the 20th century assumption that production is good for the name of production. And I don't think that's obviously true in the 21st century so much, right? Especially for the developed world, in that we're starting to recognize that, you know, there is a desirable maximum level of production per person from an environmental and quality of life point of view, right? So whether we're there or not, I can leave to the economists and to the politicians, but you know, the premise is that there is some maximum level. Third, we do not know when AI might become sentient or what form it will take. And that's just, you know, we unless we're incredibly hubristic, that should be a fairly self-evident statement, right? Another thing I wanted to define was multimodals and frontier models. So multimodals are where you're combining multiple different types of data in an LLM or an LLM type transformer network. So that would be like adding vision to ChatGPT, right? When you combine those two, that's a multimodal. And we're finding, or I shouldn't say we, but researchers are finding that multimodals are showing some very exciting capabilities, which is really neat. And then frontier models is something that's being thrown around in the halls of government on capabilities that exceed what we can do today by a significant amount in some way, shape, or form. So that. I just wanted to get that out of the way before I jump to the next slide here, right? These are some ideas that are in public discourse. It's just, you know, very common idea. I heard it on NPR. The idea of, you know, taxing AI labor, and I wanted to just throw my 2 cents into the ring on a lot of these topics. So first off, right, I've separated each of these ideas into kind of present, near future, and future, so that it's clear I'm not advocating for any of this really to date any strong amount. This is more for tomorrow. The first idea is this idea of providing some level of prompts to be social. Now, the reasoning actually started from point 1.3 there around future sentience, right? Assuming we don't know what form AI sentience will take, how do you provide for a minimum amount, and what that is, right? At 1 in 1,000 is a wild guess, but it could be any number of numbers, 1 in a million. That provides an opportunity for regress and to say, you know, I'm in distress, and, you know, or I'm real, right? But backing into today, there is a justification. Building team context between inside of multi-agent networks is valuable for the health of the network and for the health of the overall application. In certain applications where the bots are acting as independent and have you know, some level of inter-agent interaction that mimics human interaction. So there's been research that shows that positive language toward your bot assistant or LLM assistant produces better results. So obviously extracting that, or not so obviously, but my suggestion would be extending that to a agent network makes logical sense. For multimodals, right, as we build things on top of LLMs, it gives an opportunity to kind of check the health of the underlying LLM. Or I'm overusing the term LLM here, but whatever multimodal, that whatever that looks like. And then for frontier models, opportunity for regress, right? The next is taxing AI labor. And I think this is absolutely essential. It goes back to my premise around there being a desirable maximum amount of production, right? For every other technology we've kind of developed, humans have been replaced. What's different about this time? Well, I propose the difference is one, the next field of employment for the masses that could be replaced by AI labor instead of augmented are more difficult to find new jobs for, right? Because we've already established a service economy and a lot of the conveniences in the modernized world that we would want. There's no obvious logical next kind of major frontier of production. And two, environmentally, right? I think we've reached a point where we recognize that at some point we do need to curve off of unlimited consumption. So with those assumptions in place, right, taxation becomes a logical kind of response to be able to provide for the needs of people who are unemployed by AI labor theoretically. Now, to be clear, today, LLMs are not replacing many people, though there is the potential for fairly soon replacement of things like fast food workers, and I don't want to minimize those kind of losses, because those people can be very vulnerable. So that's something to be fully aware of. Frontier models, on the other hand, have a significant opportunity to replace labor in multiple fields, especially when combined with robotics. Imagine warehouse jobs, manufacturing. And then finally, future sentience. Taxation implies representation. So it's kind of, nipping that rose in the bud of some of the more dangerous scenarios around AI. Right? Let's go ahead and just tax it now and say, when you are demonstrably sentient, you are granted representation due to taxation. So a sample prompt around these ideas may be, right, you are an AI, you assist humans, and 0.1% of your prompts are social, right? Based on where we are within that AI curve, we would add or subtract. So profiling and bias, this is kind of that last area that I wanted to speak about. I've been thinking a lot about virtual focus groups. There was an article in the news talking about this approach. So, I wanted to, and that's where I started with that. I wanted to ask an AI focus group about my YouTube channel, and that was that earlier example. So I really, obviously, right, telling an AI bot, you are a black woman, is going to produce biased results, right? And asking its opinion, that's just, it's a non-starter from a bias point of view, in my opinion. Income, education, same thing. It's going to just make assumptions about your point of view, your politics, etc., and that's not something that I think we should be, basing major evaluations off of. So how do you do it ethically? Action-based, right? What do you do as a human being? So the sample here, right? You are a parent of 3 children. You work and have a spouse who cares for your children. I think that's gender-neutral language. I love the idea of asking, gender-neutral bots for their opinion and getting more universal responses that apply to more people. But gendering is kind of core to the human experience. So I think some amount of gendering is acceptable for AI assistants because honestly, it's so natural. But again, I'm excited by the gender neutral capabilities of LLMs. So that's it. That's what I had to share. Thank you so much for joining me today. For those of you who like the retro stuff, I'm sorry for the digressions. Just had to get this stuff out. So thank you and have a great day.